This is one of the most important countries in the world today, and you've probably never even heard of it before. This is Djibouti, and in many ways, this African country has found itself as the center of the world today. Djibouti has eclipsed its fate and made itself the center of geopolitics. The country that would become vital to world politics was first a colonial creation. In 1886, France occupied this area and was known as French Somaliland. Then, in 1967, renamed it into an overseas territory called French Afar in Issa. The new name denotes the two main ethnic groups, Issa Somalis and Afars. The majority Issa constitutes 60%, while the Afars comprise 35% of the total population. This ethnic divide would lead to intermittent civil wars after Djibouti won independence in 1977. Power in the country belongs completely to the majority Issa Somalis, which leads to Afar grievances and rebellions. Like most post-colonial nations, the journey to development was long and arduous. But Djibouti had a special advantage which other nations simply didn't, and that is its gifted geography. Djibouti finds itself next to a choke point, right next to Bab el-Mandeb, or the Gate of Tears. This critical choke point connects the Red Sea and Indian Ocean, an area where every year approximately 20,000 ships and 30% of world trade pass through, going up to Europe and the Americas. This is made possible by the Suez Canal, which opened in 1869. Before that point, ships would have to travel all the way around Africa, making the journey significantly longer and more costly. The Suez Canal essentially revolutionized shipping and travel. Many countries began to see the importance of holding this choke point, and thus began taking advantage of Djibouti's location. One of the first countries to take advantage of its position was neighboring Ethiopia. This began with the Ethiopia-Eritrea War that would push Ethiopia into the hands of Djibouti. The war had effectively severed both countries' relations. Ethiopia, being a landlocked country, needed a new outlet to the sea. This made it heavily dependent on Djibouti. More than 90% of Ethiopia's trade now travels through Djibouti. This proved to be a huge benefit for Djibouti as well, giving it a much-needed economic stimulus for a country which essentially produces nothing. This war began to alter Djibouti's strategic significance in the region. But it wouldn't be until the global war on terror, starting in the early 2000s, and the rise of piracy in the region where Djibouti's strategic significance exploded. In neighboring Somalia, piracy and al-Shabaab, an Islamist movement, began to threaten international trade. The real and present danger of piracy to this critical waterway galvanized Djibouti's strategic importance. With the rise of piracy, many countries wanted to safeguard this all-important waterway. Piracy had led to the loss of hundreds of millions of dollars in trade. To prevent this, some countries began establishing military bases in Djibouti. This was also beneficial for the government, for in exchange they extracted large sums of money. The first foreign military base belonged to France, Djibouti's old colonial ruler. As was mentioned before, exiting colonialism and trying to build your own country was difficult. This was especially true for Djibouti, which had no army, essentially no arable land, and no resources. So they made a deal with France. France would offer them protection and economic aid in exchange for a military base. After 9/11, the US also wanted a base, and it got it. Djibouti became the first military base for AFRICOM, Africa Command. AFRICOM is responsible for the US's military operations in Africa. It helps fight regional conflicts and maintains military relations with African countries. This base became critical for launching operations against terrorists in the region. And I think the US chose Djibouti as its first permanent base in Africa for a specific reason, and it was to protect this critical area from terrorists or any other threat. The US realized that it was imperative to control the choke point. Over the years, Japan would also join in, serving as its only overseas military base. Italy also has a military base, and German and Spanish troops are also hosted by France. These bases cost a good amount too, which makes a big difference, especially for a poor country like Djibouti. America, for example, pays $63 million annually to rent its military base. With Djibouti already bustling with many foreign military bases, countries still want to come in. Saudi Arabia is the most recent country to reach an agreement with Djibouti for a military base. India is also looking to build a base in the future. Russia too applied for a base but was rejected. This probably happened because of the potential for conflict of interests. The US, with its oversized influence, probably didn't want Russia right next to it. Djibouti, in a matter of decades, managed to transform itself from a tiny country no one cared about into the center of the world. But there was one more thing that truly sealed this transformation. In 2017, China decided to join in and build a military base. For the first time, China, a rising great power, had a military base right next to the world superpower. It was an indication of the coming great power competition between these two countries. The struggle for global supremacy in a world sliding away from US hegemony, where the US was a sole superpower, to a multipolar world, a world where there's many centers of power and not just one. And Djibouti, quite unexpectedly, became the center of this new world being created. The US now had a near equal adversary vying for supremacy in the region. China's acquisition of a base is even more intriguing when you remember that Russia tried to apply as well, but was rejected. China was allowed in, and probably offered a better deal than Russia. But it's still perplexing that the US would allow China to be right next door. It just goes to show China's rising power in the world. Djibouti was now the center of the historic shifts taking place in the world. It is truly a testament to the power location can give you. But this strategic location, and the wealth that is created, hasn't trickled down to the people. It's largely gone to the people in power. This is where this positive story of how this tiny country's rise to prominence takes a dark turn. The domestic issues of Djibouti remain, and the people of Djibouti remain in abject poverty, and the numerous foreign military bases popping up have had negative consequences as well. They've done this in one key fundamental way, and that is by eroding Djibouti's state legitimacy. Part of what makes a state legitimate is its ability to provide fundamental tasks to its people. But when the US is delivering social services, such as building clinics, digging water wells, rural education, services which Djibouti's government should be doing, the legitimacy of the state comes into question. The bond between the state and the people is considerably undermined when foreign agents do these tasks. Additionally, the government of Ismail Omar Gula, who has imprisoned, tortured his own people, has faced little to no real criticism from the US. Because of geostrategic reasons, countries with bases tolerate these actions. The unwillingness to act on these transgressions has allowed Djibouti to slip into autocratic tendencies. And of course we have to remember that the real economic benefits only go to the political elite. They don't go towards the common people. The gap between the majority, of whom are poor, and the very few rich people at the top will only grow. The domestic situation in Djibouti just goes to show that the foreign military bases are not all good for the country. Being the center of attention isn't always a good thing. China's military base in 2017 additionally complicated things. From a domestic perspective, hosting the two greatest military and economic powers in your country can actually be a bad thing. If tensions between China and the US increase dramatically, the people of Djibouti would suffer the most. Being the proxy of a great power conflict never ends well for the host country, and the thing is, the strategic value of Djibouti has actually increased over the last 5-10 years, and it's not all because of China. The Middle East has also a lot to do with the importance of Djibouti. It's been a hotbed for conflict over the years. The US and other Western countries have used their bases in Djibouti to counter tensions in the region. Nothing could have made the strategic value of Djibouti more clear than the Houthi rebels, who in response to Israel's war in Gaza, attacked dozens of commercial ships in the Red Sea. These incidents of Houthi targeting of vessels endangered this all-important waterway. Major shipping companies had to avoid the Red Sea and Suez Canal. Avoiding this route would mean using the old one, all the way around Africa, dramatically increasing travel times and driving up costs. The Houthis could still be a problem in the future, even after the January 19 ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. With the new plan for Gaza President Trump has, and the outright rejection of it by Arab states, indiscriminate Houthi attacks could once again increase, endangering this critical route. And of course, the Middle East could descend into a regional war. With Iran and its proxies weaker than ever, this might be the year a wider war happens. All of this just shows that Djibouti's role in the world will continue to grow. The military bases are used for protection of this critical route, transporting thousands of ships carrying precious cargo to their destinations. Djibouti also manifests itself as a reflection of the growing reality of our world, the emerging multipolar world. With both China and the US having their military bases there, shows the growing power of China and the declining power of the US. Djibouti in some ways got blessed by its geography, but in other ways it has been a curse for its people, not allowing for it to develop in a proper manner, a parody of a sovereign nation, but rather a hub for foreign military bases. Being the center of the world, having all the attention on you is not always a good thing. Djibouti proves that. This has been the story of Djibouti, a nation you've probably never heard of, but which is significant for a host of reasons. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.